Will more than two banks fail? Is it time to buy gold? Recently, the FDIC took over two banks that were in trouble. Now we have reports that an additional 20 regional banks have in excess of $650 billion in bond losses. The Fed admits that their increase in interest rates have done little to bring inflation under control. They may well increase the amount and frequency of interest rates. Isn't it time to consider gold in your portfolio? From January 1st, 2023 to today, the price of gold is up twice as much as the S&P 500. Go to blacksandwhites.us, click on the gold bar, and reach out to Advisors Metals and ask Ira, is gold right for you? Call now. It's important. Welcome to Black and White, a conversation with Dan Perkins. It's time to bring all of us together to talk about the issues that concern us. It's time to hear from people who want to deal with only the facts. And it's time for you, as Americans, to re-engage in your right of freedom of speech. It's time for you to join me in the conversation on Blacks and Whites. Welcome back to Black and White, and joining us today is Dick Russell. He is the author of a new book that's not quite out yet, but should be out next month, The Real RFK Jr., Trials of a Truth Warrior. Dick, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I guess since I haven't got the book because you can pre-order it, but you can't get it till
it is available now, by the way.
It is.
Yes, just
okay, because I thought it was July it was supposed to come out.
Nope, June 20th.
Okay, all right. So I'll go back on Amazon and get it. Why did you write the book?
You know, I've known Robert Kennedy Jr., Bobby, as many call him, including myself, for more than 20 years. We first got to know each other around environmental issues because I was writing a book about gray whales and another about the Atlantic striped bass, a fish that I'd been very involved in helping to save. And gray whales, I was following the migration and writing also about a salt works that was planned, an industrial salt works in Mexico inside the breeding lagoon where they came every year. So Bobby was also involved in these two things, the striped bass situation on the Hudson River, where he was part of the river keepers, and the gray whales for the Natural Resources Defense Council. He was an attorney at the time for them. So we got to know each other in the course of that. I wrote chapters about him in those books and then did a profile of him for a magazine, and we became friends over time, and we had a lot of common interests, and I finally decided to write a book, or write a biography of him. It wasn't his idea or mine initially, but my publisher came to me a year ago in July, I think it was, or June of 2022, and asked if I might do it. And my reasoning was he was being so vilified by the media and portrayed as this anti-vaxxer, crazy conspiracy theorist on all these issues, and I knew that wasn't the case. I mean, I knew that his stance on the vaccine question was not that he was anti-vax per se. He wanted safe vaccines and to make sure they'd been adequately tested as against a placebo before our kids got jabbed in the arm, or we did. And so I wanted to write a book that would show that this guy had an amazing environmental record as a lawyer, accomplished incredible things, and also tell the story of what he had to overcome in his life to become a guy who was so courageous to get out there and just tell the truth about what he saw.
Is there a single thing that you can point to that took place during your relationship that made him decide to run for president this time?
Well, you know, he's had many opportunities to run for higher office. So ever since back in 1992, when he was a lot younger, and he never did it. He could have probably become governor of New York, or certainly attorney general from New York, or a senator. But he was raising 6 kids through these years, and he was also out there, talking to thousands of people about environmental issues, and quite happy doing that. So he never did it. But in recent times, I think he just came to realize that, wow, this democracy that we live in is in real peril, and nobody's really addressing why and what we can do about it in an honest way. And so he decided, he's a guy who can work across party lines. He's worked with Republicans all his life and independents to get things done in the environmental field. And he thought, maybe I'm the guy who can unite people and bring them together and heal this terrible divide that we're in this country.
Do you think, just to make sure that I understand what you're saying, are you saying that he believed it was more than just the
Yeah,
environmental issues. There was something systemically wrong going on in our country in lots of different ways.
I think that's absolutely true. And in particular, he has witnessed personally and firsthand this merger, between corporate and state power, that where all of these companies and our elected officials and the administrations are captured by these agencies, by whether it's big pharma or whether it's the chemical or oil and gas giants. And he's been seeing this for years, and who was really doing anything about it? I mean, there was no there. His belief was there needed to be a huge transition in this country that would really benefit regular folks, middle class and people who didn't have anything, and not just create 500 new billionaires like we saw during this pandemic. So yeah, I mean, he saw a lot that was wrong systemically, and that's what he's been talking about ever since he announced in April that he was going to run.
I find it, as a person who's studied politics for over 50 years, I find it fascinating that a man who, let's say, came out of the blue, wasn't on most people's radar as a possible presidential candidate, came on, and as you said, in April, and now stands within 10, 12 points of a favorable rating of the sitting president of the United States. Is he surprised at that?
I think he's happy about it, and also, doing pretty well in raising the funds that you need to make this kind of an effort. His favorability rating, actually, this was surprising. I thought pleasantly surprising. There was a poll taken by The Economist magazine and a big website, I forget who, a couple of weeks ago, that showed his favorability rating. That's not a poll about who would get elected, who they'd vote for necessarily, but his favorability rating among voters was higher than either President Biden or Donald Trump. So that meant that a lot of people already were really listening to what he had to say and taking it seriously and thinking maybe this guy is going to, stand up for me.
It was fascinating to me that so quickly after he announced, the mainstream media and Democratic politicians went after him and tried to quickly knock him out of the race as not a viable candidate. Did that surprise him that the Democrats turned on him?
I don't think it surprised him, but I think he was, I think the extremity of it hurt him, certainly, just as a person. But I don't know that, he's been maligned for a long time. People are scared of him. I mean, because, he has told the truth about a lot of things, including the public health issues that most people didn't want to hear about. I mean, most people in power anyway. So yeah, he's somebody who's I think reaching people and will reach more and more, even if they don't let him into the debates. We could talk about that, and there may not be any debates if President Biden has his way. Yeah, I think it's I think anyway. That's all I can say about it at this moment.
Okay, I think I'm correct that the Democratic National Committee is not going to have any primary debates.
Right, that's what they've said, and they've moved the primaries around, so New Hampshire isn't the first one that President Biden's going to be taking part in.
Are you saying that if he were to get the nomination, then Joe Biden wouldn't have to worry about whether he was going to be in a presidential debate? If Joe Biden doesn't get the nomination and Mr. Kennedy is the Democratic nominee, he would, I think he would relish the opportunity to debate whoever the Republican nominee is.
Oh yeah, for sure he would. And I think he would welcome the opportunity to debate President Biden or any other Democratic candidate, because he's a really smart guy and a very effective debater. And that's why, nobody will do it. I mean, they know that he'd probably eat their lunch. And so, now that the primaries have been shifted around, it's very likely, I would think, if he is the only candidate running in New Hampshire, and he is, or Iowa, where he is, that he's going to have a good showing in those primaries, and people will turn out and vote for him, even if he's the only candidate, or he and Marianne Williamson are the only candidates.
Do you think that he is topped out in terms of his favorability rating and his desirability as president hit around 20, 21, 22%, but hasn't moved up any further? Is he not gaining any more support, or what's going on?
Well, I think he just did a town hall meeting the other night, a gathering where people were able to ask him questions. He did this in Chicago for an hour and a half, and it got a lot of attention. He's been getting more press attention, still most of it negative, but not entirely. And he's doing an awful lot of podcasts and some big ones. You know, he's been on with Elon Musk. He's been on with Joe Rogan, the biggest of all. And so he's reaching a lot of people. And I don't think the recent polls necessarily reflect those appearances. So we'll just have to see. But I don't think he's topped out for sure.
Does he have, we got about a minute or so left in this segment, but we've got more to come. Do you think that he's, and maybe you can't answer it, but that's okay. I'll ask it anyway. Do you think he thinks that Mr. Biden really doesn't have the strength, the stamina, and the brain power to hold the office of president?
You know, he has not come out and criticized President Biden in that way in terms of his age. I think, you know, that's been shown quite a bit that he's not as sharp as Bobby Kennedy or perhaps any of the other candidates too, because he's getting up there, and he would be 86. Let's say he ran and got a second term and lived, and he'd be 86 by the time that term ended. And you know, that's really up there in years for anybody to have to hold that kind of an office and be traveling all over the world. And you know, he's not young, and Bobby is 69. But he's in really good shape physically. I don't know what President Biden does. Does he work out or not? But Bobby works out every day, goes to the gym, takes these long hikes in the morning, and does meditation on his walks, going up into the hills near his home, and he's in good shape. So you know, it's not that it isn't tiring for him. I mean, I saw him recently, and you know, he's coming off the road, and he's out there all the time, you know, talking to the public and doing these podcasts, and that's not easy, but I think, you know, he's somebody who's got the stamina.
How do his children feel about him running for president?
They're supportive of him. They've shown up at many of the events. Kids are all great. They're doing different things, and so, you know, and his wife as well, Cheryl Hines, the actress, has definitely supported him right from the beginning, that this is what he wanted to do. And so she's right. She doesn't go to all the events, but she's very busy in her own right. But his family, the immediate family, is definitely behind him.
He has some extended members of his family that serve in the Biden administration as ambassadors.
Members of his extended family, many of his siblings, disagree with him on the stands he's taken on public health and vaccines, and sometimes have been very vocal about it. He says, you know, he respects their views, doesn't feel like they hate each other. I don't think they do, but they're definitely not coming out and fighting for his campaign, most of them.
We've been speaking with Dick Russell, who's the author of the new book, The Real RFK Jr., Trials of a Truth Warrior. And you said it's available now.
Yes, you can get it on Amazon and hopefully in bookstores and through the publisher, Skyhorse. So I'm hoping people will read it and get an accurate picture of who Bobby is.
We're going to be right back with Dick in just a moment. Inflation for most people is causing them to use their credit cards to try and make up for income shortfalls. How big is this problem? In the second quarter of 2022, Americans added $46 billion to their credit card balances. Some of that could be you. The Federal Reserve Consumer Credit Report showed that the rate of interest on credit cards went from 14.56 to 16.65%. Those Americans struggling with credit card debt saw their delinquency rates escalate from 1.66% to 1.81%. The Cambridge Debt Consolidation Program may be able to help you reduce the interest rates by 2/3 and cut your time to pay off the debt from 30 years to as little as 5 years. If you're struggling and you want professional and objective help getting your credit house in order, then call 1-855-435-2066 or go to the website. Welcome back. We're speaking with Dick Russell, the author of the new book, which is available now at Amazon, The Real RFK Jr., Trials of a Truth Warrior. Dick, I want to drill down a little bit on Mr. Kennedy. We know he's an environmentalist, and he's spent a lot of time in his adult life on environmental issues. But as you said to me in the first part of this discussion, there are things beyond just the environment that are bothering him that he thinks has put the country in jeopardy. So my question would be let's move away from the environmental issues and the vaccines and those issues, and look at the rest of the country and the economy. What are the things that are important to him that he thinks as president he needs to change?
Well, I think one is certainly that he's going to be out there fighting for the middle class, which he sees as disappearing in this country, and as the divide between rich and poor has gotten bigger and bigger, and he's sensitive to how people live and feel. I mean, he's gone out there and visited folks in their communities. He was recently took a group of kids from Compton and South Central LA out to the mountains and introduced them to nature, and he's doing a lot of that, visiting with people as well to find out what do they need, what are they bothered by, and one thing that he feels is really not right is the amount of money that the military industrial complex is pouring into the Ukraine war. And not that he would cut it all off, but he feels like he'd be the peace candidate. He's talked about that. He wants to end that war as soon as possible, and he feels like the Russians would come to the table. He doesn't like Putin, but he thinks that he can help do that, and then there could be a lot more money available to put into infrastructure in this country, which is crumbling. The lead problem in our schools with the kids, all kinds of things. So that's one issue he's taken on. He's also gone to the border. He feels like we need to really revamp our immigration policy. In that way, he's similar in some ways to what the Republicans have called for, but he wants to put more money into legal immigration, because he's been so appalled when he's been to the border about the fact that really people have no idea, but it's Mexican drug cartels are running a lot of things down there, especially what he saw in Yuma, Arizona. And that's what he wants to put a stop to, is people from all these different countries pouring across that are basically working for the cartels and funneling more fentanyl into this country that's killing our kids.
The last report I saw, and it's probably 3 or 4 months old, from the Border and Customs, said that illegals crossing the border have come from at least 85 countries.
Yeah.
I don't understand how the Mexican government is allowing, and you may have answered the question, the Mexican government isn't in power, the cartels are in power. If you don't shut down the border, I mean, I get a lot of heat for what I'm about to tell you, but maybe I won't get any heat from you. I am amazed at the women's movement in the United States, who is absolutely dead silent about the women and girls that are raped on the caravans coming from South America all the way across Mexico, and then into the United States, and are sold as sex slaves. They're not talking about it, nothing. And yet we're abusing young girls and women as border crossings, and it's clearly the cartels that are doing that. And it's clearly China that is supplying the fentanyl base, which goes to the cartels in Mexico and is brought across the border. What is his feeling about our relationship with China?
Well, he has pointed that out, that is happening. And he's also pointed out the terrible abuses that women and others are suffering when they come across the border. And so that's what he wants to put a stop to. He feels in terms of China that what we need to be doing is talking with them. That has not been happening with the Biden administration. That they've been really it's been very isolated in terms of, and he would like to have meetings with with Premier Xi, talk to him about the fact that yes, we could compete economically in a real way, but not let's get away from this war footing that seems to be ramping up over Taiwan, for example. So he's talking about dialogue and debate and discussion. And that's what we are not seeing in this country, is the way he sees it and the way I see it too.
Do you think he feels that China has been manipulating the United States and we've been letting them do it?
I don't know exactly. I think that, well, in the case of just the one subject, which is where the virus came from, which has now been pretty much, I'm talking about COVID, pretty much established that it emanated from a lab in Wuhan, China, that was funded in part by the United States, by the National Institutes of Health, to do this gain of function research, which was about creating pathogenic viruses that were more supposedly for defensive purposes, existed in the natural world. So by that, I'm saying that China is now, they've never really given up their files on this.
Does he have if he were to be elected president and he walks in the Oval Office after the inauguration, is there something he would sign or something that he needs to do, he needs to do right away? Or what's going to be his demeanor?
Oh, I think he'll be ready to take action on a number of different fronts. From everything from what's going on in the Ukraine to one thing he's talked about recently, actually, which I think is very interesting, is federal legislation on marijuana. He thinks it should be legalized federally, and then the money from that, the tax money, be used to fund really important things like mental health centers for troubled kids, and who don't necessarily need these psychotropic drugs to become, what they need to be in life. And so that's one thing that he has talked about. I forget at the moment. He said he would do a number of things when he took office, and I don't know if he would do it through executive orders. He'd certainly do it through dialogue, people on both sides of the aisle.
It's interesting. Speaking of executive orders, the president didn't have a very good week this week on affirmative action and also on college loans.
No.
How does Mr. Kennedy feel about the idea of forgiving $460 billion worth of college loans?
Well, I don't know that he puts that figure on it, but I know he is in favor of forgiving student loans in a real way, and not putting an extra burden on people. He feels in education, I think he just said it on his Twitter feed, education of the young is vitally important, and our public schools are failing, and something's got to be done about that. So he's definitely not happy with what the Supreme Court just did.
And what is his feeling about the job that President Biden has done so far? He's
not happy with it. He feels like President Biden's policies are misguided on a number of fronts, and he's willing to say that, and that's why he's running for president.
We had the Department of Fish and Game last week issue orders that you can't use lead sinkers on fishing lines or lead bullets in shotguns to hunt or fish on federal lands.
Didn't know about that.
Yeah, well, it caused quite a ruckus, and it looks like they might pull that back and rethink that. I mean, that seems to be the operating procedure of the Biden administration. They throw something out and they wait and see what the reaction to it is. If nobody complains, they leave it alone. If enough people complain, they take a real hard look at it, and many times they capitulate and pull it back. Not a very productive way to run a country and legislate.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's politics, isn't it? But the thing that's interesting about Bobby is he's never been in politics per se. He's running very independently of that and of that kind of money, which is, I mean, look at the lobbyist situation in Washington. I mean, it's out of control. And the biggest lobbyists of all are the pharmaceutical companies, who basically own, a lot of legislators, and have run so many ads on TV now that they pretty much own the news networks too. And that never used to be allowed before 1986. They weren't allowed to advertise on TV. New Zealand's the only other country that allows that, by the way. And that's one thing Bobby has said he would stop, actually.
Yeah.
As soon as he came into office, he would shut down the ability of pharmaceutical companies to through the FCC to advertise on TV.
Yeah, I read that article about only one other nation allows advertising for pharmaceutical products on television, and we get inundated with it in the United States. What's the chances, even if he were to be elected, that he can fight the lobbyists successfully?
Who knows? But I know he would try, and he would try much harder than anybody is exhibiting right now, because the lobbying power of these huge industrial complexes is just out of control. And they even lobby the Supreme Court justices and successfully, and they take money from these companies. And that's what we've been seeing lately. So I think that's a big problem, that the corporate capture of our country, it has nothing to do with free market capitalism. It's basically socialism for the rich and these big corporations. And I think he would do everything he could to end that.
Last question before we go. It's pretty evident that the social media had tremendous influence in the most recent presidential campaign and even in the midterm election. They've grown extremely powerful. What does Mr. Kennedy feel about what needs to be, if anything, done to that communication structure?
He has said he would call everybody together, all these big companies, Facebook and Google and Instagram, and have a meeting in the Oval Office right away about their impact. Certainly, their impact on kids and how kids are really addicted to their cell phones. And cell phones can also cause some serious injuries, neurodevelopmental injuries, if they're overused. And also the censorship that's been going on. I mean, he found himself during the pandemic kicked off of Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, by the way, for his supposed anti-vax views. And he couldn't, I mean, he's been censored for years, and he's a First Amendment guy who is going to fight to, allow people freedom of speech. And he's a direct victim of that, through the through Facebook and other forms of social media. So he'd talk about those things with the companies right away.
We've been having a wonderful conversation, insightful conversation into Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with Dick Russell, talking about his relationship with RFK Jr. and his new book, The Real RFK Jr. Trials of a Truth Warrior, which is available at Amazon or your bookstores. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
My pleasure. We'll be right back. We are Americans, male and female, from many races and cultures from all over the world. One thing above all else is we are patriots who protect our nation and defend, when necessary, our Constitution from attacks both foreign and domestic. Today, as American patriots, we must take back our country from those who want to destroy it and us. We must start by taking back our children and their education. Parents, not unions, should be in charge of our children's education. We must be sure that they are taught about the greatness of America and its people. Our children should not be indoctrinated with the belief that parents are racist and are evil and trying to destroy the world. As patriots, we must take back our country from foreign nations who want to destroy us and our way of life. Yes, as patriots, we want America to be first. We want an open and fair trade policy, energy independence, safe cities, and secure borders where we can grow and prosper as a nation of free people. Become an American patriot. Help take back America by voting Republican in the November. Thank you for joining us today, and we'd like to hear your comments or questions. So go to bwradionetwork.com. That's bwradionetwork.com and give us your questions or comments. And thanks for joining us today.